Don't get drunk.
I'm okay. I'm on a...
Not you.
Have some more
I can have another one?
No, Captain Slurry voice. Don't get him drunk.
Me?
No. You
What
just
do you
went
mean,
to crib.
Captain Slurry voice?
Hi, folks. This is Louis Herfin, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shadow TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shadow on TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece for the hit HBO series Westworld. I am one of your 4 co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my 3 co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Carrie Gross.
Hello.
And Gene Daddy Delos Lyons.
Dead isn't what it used to be, Lawrence.
And this is our fan email episode called the Westworld Telegraph, where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and provide our feedback on the top listener emails for the week. This week's episode was entitled Reunion. There were so many great emails that kept pouring in, I think based upon, Big D, your theory.
Again, I don't want to call it a theory. It's more like a rambling fever dream. I'm still giving some shape to it. So hopefully on Tuesday's podcast, I'll be able to refine it a little bit. We've gotten some great tips and ideas. So together, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah, I feel like there were some listeners who have been with us since episode 1 that mostly really enjoyed the hypothesis that you had written out, that you had laid out in at the end of our deep dive episode of Reunion. However, there was one fan in particular, Gene, that cared nothing for the hypothesis, and she did not like the format at all.
Can I get 3 guesses?
Yeah, you can get 3 guesses.
All right. Guess what? Was it Gillian?
Yeah, Gillian did not like
Jackpot.
where we went at all. She felt like we got a little too tinfoily, and I retorted with, we got such great positive feedback from it. I think we gave what the fans, what they were expecting, what they wanted.
So I think Big D made a really important distinction in saying that it wasn't a theory. And what we were doing was really trying to get the ball rolling, where we said there are some pieces that we've taken for granted that don't quite fit together. And it all started with that timeline. So once we hit the timeline, then we started saying, well, what doesn't click? And there were just inconsistencies, parts that were a little odd that we somehow just nodded to. And I think in Reunion, the show was trying to take us back to those moments and say, pay close attention to where it doesn't match up. And as a result of that, we got a ton. I mean, I've never seen email volume like this for the Telegraph. People are very interested in these concepts, and they're adding to it, which is exactly what we asked for in the deep dive, is please expand on these ideas.
Yeah, I think the goal when we started this wasn't just to rehash the episode. You just watched it. You don't need me to sit there and read all the plot points. The object is that we're the water cooler. It's Monday. You just watch the show. I only work with one person who watches the show. And every Monday morning, he comes over to my desk and we talk. So the goal is that this is one big group. And there are plenty of podcasts who do the rehashing of the episode. I just don't think that's us.
That being said, if you've never listened to the podcast, we do 3 episodes a week. We do an Instacast where we give our immediate thoughts right after the release of Sunday's episode. Then we do a deep dive episode that's released on Tuesdays. And then we do a fan email response of the top ones. But you can read all the great emails that we receive throughout the week on our website, shatontv.com. There you can actually respond underneath and give your opinions of those particular emails. That being said, if you didn't hear yourself on today's email, fret not, good sir or good madam. We encourage you to keep writing in or send a voicemail to 914-719-SHAT and give your opinion or challenge us as we move through this season of Westworld together. Big D, turn on this week's Westworld Telegraph. All right, this week's first Telegraph talks about the man in black being terminally ill and the meaning of the door. It comes from Ross Trey Gregory III. I'm going to turn things over to my great friend Carrie Gross, who's going to read this email.
Okay, so like Jean said, we got so many emails, so we're not going to be able to read every point in every email, but we wanted to pick out some of the key points that we thought were really relevant. And this one from Ross Gregory says, "Hey guys, I have a bit of a theory on the motivations of the Man in Black / William. I have this idea in the back of my head for a while, but I think last week's episode was the tipping point for me. The door is a metaphor for uploading consciousness into a host. MIB's goal in season 1 is to find the maze because he is under the impression that it is some final game for him. When Ford and the Men in Black are sharing a drink together, Men in Black asks, 'Am I any closer to finding what I'm looking for?' Ford responds, 'The urgency does not quite fit the character. It betrays a certain anxiety.' What is the urgency? Does the Man in Black want to find the maze because it might give him a way to save himself and live in the park forever? As stated above, the Man in Black already knows there is some sort of R&D in the park for saving someone who is terminally ill. Ford seems to be taunting the Man in Black because he already knows he is sick. Ford has eyes and ears everywhere and seems to know everything. Little Ford even referred to it as a way out. If he knows this, then the door he keeps toying Men in Black with has to be a way for him to step through the door of his human form to one of a host. Just remember, the game begins where you end and ends where you begin."
I feel like this is a real interesting concept, though, because as we were talking in our deep dive about what the end game is for the different characters, one of the theories that came up was the idea of immortality. And I didn't think anything of it at first. It didn't look like anything to me. And in fact, it was something that I said, I don't know if I really subscribe to this belief. But if you remember from season 1, Ford says to one of his workers, what happens when you achieve immortality, when you've solved all of man's great diseases, right? That's the world that we assume Westworld is in. All the great diseases have been solved for. We thought in season 1 that had to do with something medically relevant, that it might be a pill that people take to cure cancer. But what if the achievement to live forever and to cure any man's illness is to transfer consciousness into an android or a host?
Right. It takes on a whole different scope in the show and would really appeal to me, in fact. I'm not saying this is accurate, but if everybody visiting the park was there simply to be recorded and transferred, it makes a lot more sense for $40,000 a day, right? And when we talk about the fact from the get-go, we're like, why would you want to go to an Old West park? And so then the question is, why do they make it an Old West park? And again, why do I have a rock and roll dentist? You know, like why, why? It's because that's where we are as a society, where it's not just the service that you're getting, but they dress it up a bit, right? So if you're going to have your consciousness recorded, you could sit in a room and have them ask you a bunch of questions or whatever, or they could get the truth of it, which is to have you go through a simulation.
Which is why Scientology exists.
Yeah, what really stuck out to me was after the after this week's episode, when Jim Delos, you can see the urgency. You know, how close are we? How close to me? You know, you've promised me, and mirror that with the urgency that the Man in Black showed Ford, and Ford even calls him out on it. What's your urgency? Why such a rush? That anxiety does not seem natural to the Man in Black's character, so he knows he's on a time crunch, and I think we're going to find out why.
Our next email is from Dale in the UK. He says, "Hi guys, just been listening to the deep dive for episode 2 and have a few thoughts. I think William's project, The Weapon, is possibly the body swap facility, either host to host or human to host or both. William seems to have promised Jim Delos an answer to his illness, and this could be a place to build that research. Regarding the tinfoil hat theory of Peter Abernathy being Papa Delos, or Daddy Delos, as Raj like to call him.
He said Big Papa Delos.
Big Papa Delos. I can only think this would be the case if it was an experiment that went wrong, and they thought, fuck it, no point wasting a perfectly good host. Finally, the line from Teresa Cullen way back at the beginning of season 1 is really resonating with me that we've seen of season 2 so far. It says, this place is the one thing to guests, another thing to shareholders, and something completely different to management. Really enjoy the podcast, guys. It's an enhancement to the TV series for me."
So we always tried to wonder what were the 3 different reasons for the 3 different groups. The shareholders, they might want the IP out of the park, you know, for predictive analytics or for some kind of military purpose. The guests obviously want to go and have adventure, have sex, get their rocks off, find out who they are. And we always assumed that management was just an extension of the company Delos. But what if the management actually means the hosts, that the actual park is being run? Let's say it is an AI or it is Ford who is assisting. These are the management. What if their goal was always to bide their time, advance, and then break out of the park?
I read management as the man in black.
Management could be the man in black, because when we see Teresa and Ford having dinner together, Ford elaborates that he's upset that the money men, Delos, ruined his initial vision of what this technology could be. And he really seemed like he wanted to create life. And that was the intention, not this Vegas on steroids.
We should temper our expectations and calm down a little bit, though, because nowhere in any of the show have been showing concrete proof that you could actually transfer consciousness into a host.
Okay, but why then would they take an entire episode 1 of season 2, introducing the idea that I can swab some DNA from, sexual experiences, and then take out the, what was it? The IMD, the internal mind device. I think that's what one of our listeners said that he wanted to call it, the IMD.
Catchy.
Yeah, very nice, right? It's an acronym. He's a he's a veteran, like Big D. IMD. Why would they introduce something like that if they weren't doing something like conscious swapping?
Totally simple. Again, if we're talking about analytics, right? So you've got the recording device, you're recording behaviors. The DNA is, if I could have perfect analytics, right? Like right now, I can track what people are doing online professionally is what I do. But what I don't have is a look into their genetic makeup. What would make them more predisposed to things, right? The ultimate data I could get on you is your DNA. Of course I want it.
So what you're saying is it's not consciousness that they're after, it's the data.
I'm saying that we haven't proven at any point, like we keep theorizing about the consciousness swaps, but we haven't actually proven it's possible.
Thank you, Dale, in the UK. Our next email comes from Sarah. She says, your Arnold was never a human theory is interesting, but for one scene that doesn't quite fit is in season 1 when we saw Ford starting Bernard up for the first time when he's telling Bernard how to adjust his glasses. Why would Ford do that if Bernard wasn't based on human? Unless Ford just wanted Bernard to think he was based on a human, but I really don't buy that. So what do you think, Big D? That's your theory, right?
You have to have Bernard think that he is a human. Otherwise, it doesn't work. For him to work with the techs, he has to believe that he is actually human. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to serve Ford's overall purpose. It would make it much more difficult.
But I think what Sarah's getting at, though, is that why wouldn't you just say, Bernard, when you talk, you wipe your glasses, or you do this or that? And why would you say this is the way Arnold would do it? I think that's what she's getting at. And I've been puzzling about this one too, and I really don't have a good answer other than the fact that maybe that is key to the coding. Because if you would have asked me from the start without having it explained to me, why do they have cornerstones? Why do they go through loops? What is the maze? I would have no idea.
Well, maybe when he says that's the way Arnold would do it, he is referring to Arnold the AI, and that's the way he would do it, right?
But why would Arnold have glasses?
Here we have another email from Ken Listwick. And his summarized version here says, a popular theory is that Delos is taking powerful guests and replacing them with hosts in the real world. The DNA harvested from hosts is used to clone the guest bodies, and the recorded experience is used to program the behavior of the guest. But I see a major flaw to this theory. Recording guest experiences in the park is a horrible method of creating AI versions of the guest. Last episode, William tells James Delos that Westworld is the only place in the world where you get to see people for who they truly are. It stands to reason then that the recorded guest experiences in the park won't capture the way that a guest acts in the real world, because the entire allure of the park is that you can act differently, unrestrained, free from consequence and judgment. Thus, a host AI based on these recordings would be of little to no value in the real world because it would be based off a guest's hidden personality traits. The clone and replace would end up looking like an outwardly regular person like William going to the park for a week and coming back with a dramatically different personality like the man in black. People would notice. So what do you guys think?
we've seen in our experience with the rise of social media and Facebook over the last decade, we've seen individuals who in their private life may seem reasonable, may seem like, they're individuals of great standing. When they're online, they're completely different characters. Their true self comes out. And I feel like that's what Westworld is trying to say to us, is your true self is where there's a world without limits.
I would argue, though, what Ken is saying, and I agree with him, is that this is a terrible way to tell the way a person would act. So if you're trying to make a replacement of me, and then you caught me in my private moments, and then you had me acting like that around my family, they'd be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
So, Roger, if you're going to create a clone of Carrie,
yes, I will.
And a clone should be believable. Would you like Carrie to act in a way that no one has ever seen her act, her true self?
Yes, I want her to shave her armpits. Yes.
So if you want her to act in a way that the clone could be believable, she should act in the way that her public face is. This isn't about what's inside. It's about replacing somebody with a believable copy.
I don't know how Carrie acts when she's not with me. I want her true self. When she's living in a world where she can truly be herself, that's her true personality. That's who she is. It's not who she wants to be around me.
So how does that benefit you to clone her?
Because we get to the true core of who she is.
Okay. Our next email is from Wes Dobb from Richmond, Virginia. His theory here on Bernard's leak. In season 1 finale, immediately after Felix finishes his repairs on Bernard, before Maeve issues the wake-up command, Felix says, "The bullet grazed his cortical shield. It's not pretty, but he should be functional." Since Bernard was pointing the pistol to his temple when the bullet was fired, the kick of the weapon likely angled the projectile upwards. This would imply any damage from the grazing would be around the top of the cortical shield. With this assumption in mind, I note for the remainder of his scene in season 1, Bernard remains upright. I theorize that the actual leaking doesn't begin until the scene with the stable boy host in season 2, when Bernard gets knocked down in the stable. He virtually lands on his injured temple, potentially allowing cortical fluid to leak out of any fracture which would not leak when he was upright. Upon landing, he likely caused or amplified a fracture of his weakened cortical shield, thus the severe leakage leading to his critical failure.
So just one thing to touch there about Wes D. You're making an assumption. We saw Bernard holding the gun to his head, but we don't actually see him shoot himself. Dr. Ford leaves into the cold storage main room and the flash of light in the room where Bernard was with the shot. So he could have adjusted his shot.
So assuming that Bernard did shoot himself, though, I think this does answer a lot of questions where people had of like, are they really that fragile? Would a knock to the head really mess them up that badly? And we could see that if season 2 ends out playing out this whole 11-day storyline or 12-day storyline from the massacre at Escalante all the way to where we find Bernard on the beach. If we go that route, then I think that maybe this entire season even could be based on this one incident, this one happenstance, almost fatalistically, which would be very interesting. So I like this, Wes. I like this explanation.
I would not have. We talked about this in the first deep dive. Why was Bernard so weak? It's because it was a rush job. How many times have we been to car repair facilities and they've done half-assed jobs and our fucking car smokes, and then we got to bring it back and be like, hey, my car is smoking. Please fucking repair it. That's what's happening to Bernard here.
So thank you, Wes D. If you email us again for the 6th time with your address, I will make you and Roger matching tinfoil hats, and I'll send it to you in the mail.
Don't tease me.
Our next email here is from Michael Leek. He says, Delos is using the host to store or recreate people's memories and hosts through advanced technology. Not only is Delos recreating prominent people, but it's doing this with average people who help through Williams' charity. People's consciousness are knowingly or unknowingly being transferred to hosts, then given back to families who their loved ones want back, seemingly healthy. What makes this important? We know Delos Sr. was seeking treatment, and Abernathy lost it when he saw the picture of William's wife. Old Pete started talking about how he needed to protect his daughter. It's not coincidence that Abernathy saw a picture of William's wife and Delos' daughter, and it caused him to lose it. We assume that the picture caused the reaction because it's both a photo of New York City in the background, causing cognitive dissonance. But what if Ford's reveries caused Abernathy to draw on Delos' memories? This means his concern wasn't about Dolores, explains the Shakespeare lines, and finally why Abernathy is so important to Delos. We saw in episode 2 how William was angling to be head of Delos. Senior himself says that his retirement party looks like a coronation for William, but he mentions that he may not need to retire. If this happens, William doesn't become head of the company, but if the treatment is moving Delos' consciousness into the host, then it can be wiped, then thrown into the park. It's a brutal coup d'etat, ain't it? I wouldn't trust him around my daughter either. So what do you think?
I mean, if this is the case, we asked during the deep dive, like, why would you take Delos Sr.? And, well, maybe they promised him eternal life or whatever. Like, well, why don't you just put him in cold storage? Or as I said, take his IMD and just smash it and be like, he's done. This would reveal a much darker William. But when you think about it, William is, again, let's not forget, he becomes the Man in Black, who's a fairly dark character. William may not be sane by any stretch of the imagination.
So I'm not going to buy any part of this Jim Delos in Peter Abernathy, but we have to remember, Emily, the Man in Black's daughter, hates him because whatever he did led to his wife killing herself. So doing something fucked up to her father could easily have led to that.
Yeah, and if you look at Daddy Delos compared to Lewis Hertham, they look very similar. They're almost identical. We posted something on Twitter today, the comparison of the two actors, Lewis Hertham and I forget the actor's name who plays James Delos, but it would make sense to me of why that reverie would exist and the mannerisms of Peter Abernathy. Plus, according to the rumors, in episode 3 of season 2, we're going to get a heavy dose of Peter Abernathy and Lewis Hertham, which would lead credence to this particular theory. So I think we just need to say, stay tuned.
So say this theory turns out to be true. Do you think that Delos chose Abernathy, or it was like a punishment that he was put into that role?
In my opinion, based upon the appearance of James Delos and Peter Abernathy, the Lewis Hertham version at least, it would seem to me that they purposefully chose him for the consciousness of James Delos. It's almost uncanny how incredibly their likeness is to each other.
That happens to 55-year-old white men. They all start to look alike.
I can't wait. I can't wait till I lose them.
Thank you, Michael. Our next email comes from Alice Wong. She says, since all of the hosts except for Maeve and her friends have explosives in their spines, they can't leave the park. Dolores wants to conquer the human/guest world. Wouldn't she have to re-sleeve all of her people, including herself, into bodies without explosives in order to accomplish her plan?
So I think it's a really good question. It may indicate that Dolores doesn't believe that they have to leave the park in order to take over the world or destroy all humans, that part of the weapon does not require them to actually leave the park. But it also could mean that Dolores is a model apart from others. I don't know. I assume that she would have knowledge of that, though.
But we are shown now in season 2 that several hosts have left the park, right? And are in some city and they didn't explode. So can it be shut on or shut off, or some people don't have it?
No, again, that was early on. That was before the park was up full running, advanced. Once they get to the point where they can fool people and they become a risk of either being smuggled out or escaping, that's when you have to put the security protocols in.
So what you're saying is the security protocol happened after the incident? Possibly?
Very well. And that raises the question of, if you have an incident like this where there's a host uprising, couldn't they use that explosive vertebrae as a self-destruct to end or quell any uprising?
Well, think about the time frames. So Maeve was one of the original 47 hosts, designed and created by Arnold, correct? And if she's pouring and creating a whole new host without that device inside her, then you have to imagine those devices are embedded in one of the original 47 hosts, which includes Dolores.
But remember, the only thing that makes a host original is the personality, is the brain, the computer. Maeve's entire body was replaced. If a host gets so damaged that you can't repair it, they create a new body, plug in the mind. So the original host only, corresponds to her experiences, memory, and the CPU.
Do you think only the original 47 can pass the Valley Beyond? And that's what she means when she says that? Not all of us are allowed to pass the Valley Beyond, my friend?
Well, I think we are led to believe that there was a programming or a technical issue within their makeup that allowed them to be susceptible to the reveries. So I'm hoping it's not just that she's saying that some deserve to be set free and others don't. I would like to believe it was some technical reason that some were not capable of it.
Alice makes a good point. In order for all the hosts to escape, though, there would have to be removal of these devices or a 3D printing of new hosts. So great catch, Alice. Great telegraph.
Well, one last thing I want to throw in. We got to remember, Maeve is the only one who knows about it. Dolores and that whole crew does not.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Our next email from Jill Grunenwald says, when it comes to the season 2 credits, one thing I don't think any of you have mentioned is that the Vitruvian Man figure at the end of the credits in the big circle being pulled out of the white liquid is now a woman. A rather well-endowed one, so it's not hard to see once you know what to look for. I've attached screenshots. So much of season 1 was about looking at women through the lens of the male gaze. It really was essentially at the heart of the narrative. Dolores is the welcome wagon, there to entice women who visit the park. Maeve and Clementine, of course. And while it's clear that hosts are all sexually fluid, the majority of their paying customers are still men. Angela, like Dolores, is a bit of a welcome wagon, at least in William's old time frame. It's not a coincidence, then, that women are the ones leading the rebellion. They are the ones that have been used and abused far more than male hosts, violated even. Season's 2 focus, then, I suspect, is going to continue to look at Westworld through the eyes of women. I know there's been talk about whether Dolores is believable now that this very unlikely character, but come on, if you figured out that your entire narrative arc was there to be raped by visitors every night, you'd probably be more than happy to start killing everyone too.
Yeah, Jill G. I love this telegraph because number one, well endowed. If you look at the email, what she's referring to, I think is the top half of the host body. Is that correct, Carrie? That's the screenshot that she sent us.
Yeah, the host has breasts.
Okay, all right. So, of all the nakedness that has occurred so far in season 2 of Westworld, it's predominantly been male led. So I think that would feed into what Jill is saying here is women, the concept, the leaders, the plot point, the narrative is coming from the viewpoint of the female perspective. So it's not a male dominated Game of Thrones, boobs and dragons concept anymore.
I think it's also important to note that what Westworld is doing here is a little bit different too, in the fact that when we see shows that are female focused, for instance, Orange is the New Black, or the shows like that, Girls, they're typically shows that you would say that's a chick show. It's about women, right? In this case, it's really interesting that Westworld, which was largely a show that in season 1 we were talking about, they're signing waivers and there's going to be crazy sexuality and naked people riding horses and like orgies and all that stuff, suddenly does a quick gear shift in season 2. And I agree, it's a very different perspective. Most of the leadership in the show has turned female. The sympathetic characters are mostly female, and I applaud Westworld for doing that. They did it in a very clever way.
Yeah, but you know what? Even though people may say that, oh, I'm glad that season 2 is now focused to the women. If I look back at season 1 was a, you know what, fuck yeah for women situation. Like, it was ahead of its curve. If you look at all the strong characters that came out of season 1, you look at the actresses like Tandy Newton or Shannon Woodward, they're all very predominant female characters, and they're coming from a narrative of female empowerment.
Thank you, Jill. Our next email comes from Faulkner A. How does Ford and perhaps Arnold know what Logan wants out of the demonstration? Does Logan have a reputation, or have they been watching him? Logan says that the host is exactly what he would create.
I was the one who put this bullet in there. And, some of the earlier emails questioned how much could you really gain by observing people within the park. They make this pitch specifically to Logan and so perfect. They had to have been watching him, or they had to already been collecting some data to pull off such an effective. I mean, they were desperate to get the money, and they knew. Logan even says it. He says, if I was going to create something, it would be you. So possibly their data sources are not limited to only people's interactions in the park.
Another point Faulkner had, he says here, young William tells Mr. Delos that in 20 years, this will be the only reality. And now it's been 35 years. How has the world out there changed since Dolores last saw it?
That is one of the interesting questions that I've been thinking about is, one, assuming that Dolores has been out of the park, that the entire vision of being out there at the hotel, mainland China, and all of that's real. She has a confidence, where she thinks she knows everything that's out there. And I think that there could be a very cruel twist, again, very Game of Thrones-esque, that what is actually out there is vastly different. Again, we talk about, currently how fast things change. Think about 35 years ago. And we know that technology doesn't grow in a linear fashion. It grows exponentially.
Well, not only that, but Gene, you said that in your current job, you're pulling data sources from multiple vehicles, right? You're pulling sources of data from different objects, right? So it might be, online data, it might be data fed from third-party vendors. Why would we assume that it wouldn't be fed from other data sources as well? Yeah, certainly the way that you interact in a world like Westworld or Shogun World or any of the other 4 parks, but also your online profile and your histories of interaction on websites like Netflix or Amazon. Why wouldn't we combine all those to give you a robust profile that we could upload into an advanced, Android or robot or Cylon?
Absolutely. It's much more effective than a survey.
Correct.
Good questions, Faulkner. Our next one comes from Ted S. Ted from Canada says, hey guys, I really enjoy your Westworld Season 2 podcast, and I've given you a 5-star rating on iTunes. In my opinion, Big Dick brings a nice touch of maturity to the goings-on, and I hate to single him out, but please tell him there are 2 R's in Bernard's name. Thank you. Ted in Canada, eh?
Okay, so Ted, you are correct. Once you mentioned it, I'm ashamed. I know I've been doing it. It's just hard. I'm gonna try to remember. It's Bernard, but that wasn't even as bad. I got a 1-star review on iTunes from Christelm7, and she was not nearly as nice as our Canadian friend Ted. So she wrote Bernard, not Bernard. First off, this podcast is 2nd or 3rd tier at best. If you want an excellent Westworld podcast, check out Bald Move. They're actually the best, or anything Joanne Robinson does. These guys are okay, but they aren't particularly astute, well-read, or interesting. But because I'm a huge Westworld fan, I slogged through our podcast. Thank you. An hour she slogged through, just in case they would come up with something worth hearing, much like the millionth monkey on the typewriter finally composing Hamlet. However, not only are these less bright, observant, and entertaining than other podcasts, the juvenile nickname Big D, incapable of saying the name Bernard or Bernard one more time, I'm going to lose my shit. Learn how to pronounce. And again, thank you very much, Christelm. My God-given name was Richard, so my parents called me Dick. So if you would like me to go by the nickname Big Dick, we could do that. But it is not a pun for a penis. It's actually my name.
Yeah, I'm trying to see the holes in her review, and I can't find any. I think she's nailed it. I think that's the most accurate description of this podcast.
So thank you, Christelm, for slogging through our podcast so we could plug 2 other podcasts in your review.
Yeah, Recapables. Bald Move.
By the way, I love Bald Move. I'm a paid subscriber.
You know what? I am not a fan of Bald Move. If you know what? If you want an award-winning podcast, go check out Beyond Westworld. Our friends Troy Heinritz and Aaron Peterson. They do a great job over there. We did a cross pod with them. We've also done a cross pod with Westworld Theory Cast, but Aaron and Troy do a great job. They've got other podcasts over at Golden Spiral Media. Subscribe to them; they're fantastic.
So that's it for emails. But Big D, I feel like you have some voicemails for us. Is that true?
We do. First one comes from GT in Los Angeles. And here's what GT had to say.
Hey, what's up, Chat on TV? This is GT from Los Angeles. It's for the Westworld podcast. Love the show. I noticed that the first chimes that you hear at the beginning of episode 2, season 2 reunion, many people probably caught it already, but if you're not a classical music buff, that wasn't another piece by Debussy or by Chopin. It was, in fact, Prelude in C-sharp minor by Sergei Rachmaninoff. And what's kind of interesting about this is it was one of the first hits for the young composer. It was based on chimes that he heard in Moscow from that big old, really Russian church. It was not published by him under any specific title, but later publishers would put it out under titles including The Burning of Moscow and The Day of Judgment, which of course ports well with the show. One other thing that's kind of cool, it was very common for this to happen where composers in that time at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, would work with a piano roll company. They would create an electronic recording of their performance that could be sold as piano rolls for people that had player pianos. So one would wonder, knowing that this show is pretty detail-oriented, did Ramin Djawadi somehow get a hold of one of those piano rolls of the actual composer playing this piece and then incorporate that recording into the show that we just watched? Kind of like a Ghost in the Machine in the machine? How Westworldian is that? Wow. Well, anyways, love the show. Keep it up. Thanks. Bye.
All right, GT, I love this one. So Raj and I actually, he treated me to Game of Thrones live when they came through Phoenix, and we went and saw that. And I kept thinking, I wish there was something I could yell out to Djawadi out there, to let him know that I was paying attention. If I would have known about this, I would have been like, you got that piano roll, didn't you? And he'd kind of nod and throw me a rose or something. It'd be amazing.
I think it's also super rad that we have listeners that send in voicemails like this, that we've been kind of stuck on 3 topics this entire Telegraph, and someone goes so deep into something that I wouldn't have known anything about. Our listeners delve in deep. It's rad.
Yeah. Also, Ramin Djawadi was a composer of the original Iron Man movie, which kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has led to Marvel Infinity Wars. So I feel like Ramin Djawadi, if the attention to detail is, as described in our chat voicemail, what it is, hats off to Ramin Djawadi for fucking doing this, because he's wow. The Judgment, I believe, leads into my biblical theories. So I'm all about this voicemail, and wow. I'm amazed. God bless. Can I quit my job and just do podcasts? I want to be Bald Move.
Don't quit your day job.
How dare you?
Most television shows, we wouldn't even think this was a possibility. Most shows pick songs just because they sound cool. It's a testament to Westworld and the detail that they put in that we would actually believe that they had gotten their hands on this old player scroll. So that's a testament to HBO and the way they do the show. So again, thanks, GT. Great voicemail. The next one we came from Jules in Massachusetts. And here's what Jules had to say.
Hey, what's up there, guys? This is Jules Jensen from Massachusetts, and just listened to the latest deep dive episode, and props on some of those awesome theories at the end with the Arnold AI theory. I like that a lot, and think that does kind of start to answer some of the fundamental questions with the lapse of anybody knowing about Arnold. But either way, I wanted to bring up one thing, which was relating to the Natural Splendor line. And I recently rewatched the very first episode of the whole series before season 2 premiered. And one of the first lines in the whole series between Peter Abernathy and Dolores, when she's about to set out from the ranch for the first time, he asked her if she's going to go out and see some of that natural splendor. So I thought maybe you guys had caught that and would mention it, but then I noticed it wasn't covered, so I thought it would be cool to bring that up as another time to connect those dots and pay more attention, as you said, when a character says that. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much. All right, bye.
That's a great catch, Jules. One of the things that we did mention is, as far as the line referencing Splendor, is it seems to be Arnold's interplay with the hosts regarding the way they see the world, and they're seeing it through a sort of that the marvel is still there for them. And I got to thinking about what that means about the human mind versus the host mind. Human minds are designed or programmed, at least, to notice patterns. That's something we're incredibly good at. It's why prejudice emerges, but it's how we conceive the world around us. We notice patterns in everything. It's why we see shapes in the sky. And so a host mind would conceivably not be like that. So when we see something day after day after day, it becomes monotonous, it becomes normal and mundane to us. To a host, that concept of splendor, and I think that's something that Arnold was noting is makes them a superior species, right? That makes them a superior intelligence, is that they continue to see that splendor. That's what he was driving at with Dolores, and it would make sense that that would be echoed in other hosts.
I think it's also important that Arnold or Bernard, whoever it is, always references his son Charlie and says that he and Dolores share a lot of common traits, the way they looked at the world. Being a father, and I have a 2.5-year-old now, the way she looks at the world, everything is an experience, everything is new. So I imagine the hosts are very much like children. They're learning everything about their world and the world around them. And when it's something new to you, you're always going to appreciate it, notice it. And I think it's a good catch there. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jules. Our last voicemail comes all the way from Portland, Oregon, Patrick. And here's what Patrick had to say.
Hi, guys. My name's Patrick. I live in Portland, Oregon, by way of Derby, England. Been a long-time fan. Joined you guys on Westworld Season 1. A mate at work got me introduced to it. And I followed you on the journey through Westworld and American Gods and Game of Thrones. And, of course, I am a addict of Shat the Movies each week. Love the interaction, love the banter on Twitter every week. And I think the addition of Kerry Gross only adds to the conversation and the banter as well. Anyway, enough blowing smoke up your arse. Here's my question. It's a little bit different. Hypothetically, HBO call you guys up, admire your work, and ask to bring you guys on as showrunners. They will tell you the exact layout and narrative of the story. They'll tell you how it's going to end and want your input to fill in the blanks. Do you individually accept or decline? Would one of you or all of you have to go together, or would you not and decline it because you want to see how the show plays out on TV? Hope that made sense. Keep up the good work, and yeah, hope I get a shout out. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick, for blowing smoke up my ass. Okay, so Big D, given the opportunity to write for HBO and figure out the ending to this, what would you want?
I'd like the paycheck. I think that would be nice to go to Hollywood and be a writer.
I hear HBO doesn't pay well.
It probably pays better than any of us.
Also, we're doing this pro bono. So
yes. So I think the most prepared would be Gene. And I think if you tried to put the three of us in a writing room, it would end up with someone bleeding. We'd come to blows, and we would maybe write half an episode.
But given the opportunity to find out all the plot endings, would you want to know right now?
Oh, God, because you could be part of shaping it into what it becomes. Just because what the ending is today, with your input, it might be something different. You could improve it, or we could destroy it.
But one of the options here is like without having input, just knowing, just working for HBO.
No.
You wouldn't want to just know?
No way.
All right, so you're saying if HBO came to us tomorrow and we're like, hey, Shat on TV, we love that you have eclipsed 1 million downloads.
Yeah, that's what the email said.
And we want you to, we're going to give you early access to plot points and narrative throughout the season. But we don't want you to reveal it. We just want you to tease it. And we want you to do that in a podcast format, but keep what you're doing because we love what you're doing. You're saying that you wouldn't do that?
I mean, it would help us, honestly, if we got the episodes a week early, just from a scheduling point. But I wouldn't want to know the way the series ends today. Then it's no fun. Then what the fuck? We're not part of this group that's watching it together. If I know Walter White's dead as he's cooking meth when the first episode's out, what the fuck am I going to watch?
Spoiler alert.
I haven't. Walter White's dead?
Yeah, Walter White dies in Breaking Bad.
So for me, I mean, look, I studied journalism in school. I love to write. For me, it would be a dream job to be involved with it. But one of the things that I've always maintained, and I think Westworld is now based on all the callbacks, I think that they definitely follow this pattern. You know, I have great respect for shows that have incredibly short runs. My favorite shows, Carnival, Deadwood, you know, all had very, very short runs. The BBC's version of The Office, short run, and they knew what they were going to write before they wrote it. There was a complete story arc there. I would not want to alter a complete story arc for Westworld if they've already got it dreamed up. If they don't know where it's going, I'd be happy to help.
So thank you very much, Patrick, from Portland. I appreciate you listening to us, that you listen to all the shows. It means a lot to us. The support we get from everybody is great. And I want to take a chance to really thank some people by name. Some people have gone above and beyond, donating $2, $3, $10, some as much as $100 to help support what we do. Yeah, we put out this week 4 podcasts this week. We all have full-time jobs, so it really helps. I want to thank our boy Zach Davis, Catherine McGowan, Zach Simon, I think, Jordan Boutel, Dan Patterson, our boy Richard Rugier, Derek Devontier, probably the person who can't pronounce Bernard shouldn't be reading these. Is there anybody else who wants to read it, or should I keep going?
No, I'm just laughing because the guy that got a 1-star review for not being able to pronounce Bernard is reading off fan names.
Well, these are easy. Then we have Emil Unbrand, our boy Greg R., who sponsored Rounders. Joanne K. Metzger, she has set up so each month she donates a couple bucks, and that's 3 months in a row she's done it. Carmelita Valdez McCoy has 2 months, and Joanne Morrison. So I want to thank everybody that supported us. It means a lot. $1, $2 really helps. If you can't donate, just go and leave us a review on whatever podcatcher you catch us on, or write a review on iTunes, or an email, or tell a friend. It's probably the best way you can help.
Yeah, and if you want to be part of the Westworld Telegraph, email your thoughts and theories, your corrections to hosts, HOSTS at shatontv.com. Or if you want to leave a voicemail at the Shat hotline, it's 914-719-SHAT. 914-719-SHAT. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Westworld Telegraph Edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just search for Shat on TV. We're also on Facebook. You search for Shat on TV Podcast.
Also, if you didn't hear your letter on the podcast, remember all of them are posted on shatontv.com, where we respond to all your emails and guests can comment and interact. So you can see these in their entirety, non-truncated. Some of these are pages long, so if you want to check them all out and see what we had to say about them, every single email gets a response. shatontv.com. Check it out.
We're everywhere. Fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by any of those podcatchers, be sure to leave a 5-star review and share with a friend. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review 80s and 90s movies that you, the audience, vote on. So you tell us what movies to review. We do that for you over at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my 4 co-hosts, Big D, Carrie Gross, and Gene, what were we doing?
Big Daddy Delos.
Big Daddy Delos. Lions. I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us on Sunday for our Westworld Instacast. That we're going to repeat this all over again. It's our narrative. It's our loop. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time down here in Westworld. Take care. Bye-bye.